before I'd even arrived, I was told that Bible Day was on and it would be really good for people to find out something about me. That's really daunting. I don't know you, so what on earth do you want to know about me? So we've got about 20 minutes, and I am going to share something of who I am and how I've got here. I wasn't entirely sure what I was going to say until I arrived, but as the day's gone on, I think there's more clarity has come. I think I want to put a thread underneath it about my journey and some facts, but also about what God has been doing in my life and the things that He has been showing me, which I think are there for everybody. There's a sense in which, as Will said, we are who we are, and we have to discover who God is and who we are in Him. And that's a lifetime's journey for every single one of us. So I want to frame it in that. So I want to start by describing a picture that has been really important to me for a number of years. And I came across it by chance. It might have been social media, it might have been Facebook, I can't remember. But it was a picture of a young girl, probably a 6-year-old girl, wearing a pretty dress with some angel wings on her back. I have 2 sons, so anything with pretty dresses and little girls, I think, oh, I wish I'd had that, and I could have dressed up a little girl. So I was drawn to it because it was a beautiful picture. And there was a question. The little girl was asking a question, what if I fall? And she was standing, looking hesitant, and that sense of what if I fall, I thought, that's me. I grew up feeling quite a cautious little girl, quite quiet, quite shy, which made you think, how did I end up doing this? Well, that's more to tell. But that sense that I could exactly feel what she was feeling, what if I fall? And the phrase underneath was, but oh my darling, what if you fly? And there's a sense in my life, and I think for every single one of us, that we have choices. That God knows who we are, He's made us, and He wants us to fly. That doesn't mean we all become bishops, praise God. What it does mean, though, is that we become the person He has made us to be. And that through our lives, we have to trust Him. And we have to stand in that place of cautiousness. What if I fall? But, oh my darling, what if you fly? And I can see, as I look back over my life, that thread of God saying to me very, very gently each time, what if you fly? What if you fly? What I'm so grateful for is that I grew up knowing Jesus all my life, which is a story that not many children can say these days, because the number of children that actually are exposed to even understanding who Jesus is far less than it ever was. I used to say we were 3 generations from regular church going. I think we're probably 4 generations. So a story, when I was a teenager, I wished I'd had one of those stories where I could say, oh, I had a really terrible life, I did this, 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 and this, and then my life changed. And I felt a failure because I didn't have that story. I have a story now that I find so valuable that I can say I've known Jesus all my life. Because I know that He has loved me from the time I was born. I was born into a Christian family. My father was ordained an Episcopal priest, which is Anglican in Scotland. And so I've always had that sense of God and Jesus in my life. And that has been absolutely crucial to who I am. But how has that been expressed? Well, it's been different. Isabel was talking about those lovely pictures of who Jesus is. And as a child, I had a picture on my wall that was one of the ones from that pack of Jesus in a field, a very kind of watercolour picture with birds on his arm. I think it was Margaret Tarrant. Very pastoral, very beautiful. And for me, that's who Jesus was. And I think I've learned through my life that Jesus is far more than that, and that is the journey as well that we have to make of realising the complexity of Jesus that we will never know. And the more I know Jesus, the more I realise I don't know who He is. And sometimes that's scary as well. But I've known Jesus and been able to rest on Him, and that's been strong, it's been weak. There's times I've trusted very strongly, other times I've struggled to say my prayers. And again, that's probably true for every single one of us. But being rooted in the love of Jesus from the time I was born is something that I am so grateful for. So I grew up, did all the church thing, went to university, member of the Christian Union. I studied languages at university. I went to St Andrews University. I knew I wasn't going to carry on with languages, so then you have to think, what am I going to do? And I applied for various things, and I ended up doing a management training scheme with the NHS. And had a wonderful time. in Edinburgh and across Fife, working in different hospitals and learning about how the health service is made up. And then my job firstly was working in the Royal Infirmary in Edinburgh, where I was a liaison between support services and clinical staff. So I sort of negotiated what the porters might do, what the works department might do, in order that the ward staff and the clinicians were able to do the job that they needed to do. This was at the time of general management. If you know anything about the NHS, you'll be able to work at my age. This is in the 1980s, and things changed, and the health service began tendering out those contracts. So the change was that no longer did you have a relationship with people, but you were managing contracts, and that really wasn't what I was interested in doing. So I left the NHS at that point and worked for a charity where I did HR and personnel. In the middle of that, I got married to Paul, and then we had our first son. And when he was 11 weeks old, we moved from Edinburgh to Sheffield. Paul's from Bristol, but he was doing a PhD in Edinburgh. And we always knew that we would need to move. I didn't realise quite it would be with such a tiny baby. But we moved to Sheffield, and I'd given up my job. I took maternity leave, but I knew I was never returning. And I had 7 wonderful years at home with 2 boys. We lived in Sheffield for 4.5 years. And my plan was, I'd be a mum. And I felt that there was a huge value in that. I was doing lots of different other things. I was a school governor. I was involved in toddler groups. You name it, I was doing it. And I wasn't looking to go back into work. We had joined a church in Guildford called St Saviour's. And I heard on the grapevine that they were looking for a family and children's worker. And there was something inside that made me think, oh, I really want to do that. And I had no idea where it was coming from. But I ignored it because it wasn't part of my plan. Never have a plan. Over several weeks, every time I went to church, I forgot about it during the week, but I'd go into church on the Sunday, and the deep desire to do that role grew stronger and stronger, and it didn't make sense, and I didn't know where it came from. To the point where my husband said, you're going to have to tell them that you might be interested in this job. So I spoke to the associate rector and said, I believe you're going to be advertising for a family and children's worker. When you do, let me know, because I might be interested. And he said, come and see us tomorrow. So I met with him and the youth pastor, who's a guy called Andy Emerton. He is now Bishop of Sherwood, so we had a great laugh about how we shared an office together, and he appointed me. And basically, they offered me the job. I went with my list of excuses of what I couldn't do, and I didn't want full-time. And I arrived and they said, well, we reckon you're not going to want full-time, so we've made it part-time, and basically offered it me on the spot. Now, that was a bit of a shock. Although that deep desire was there, I then felt quite inadequate. Who was I to do this job? I didn't have a teaching background, I didn't have a youth and children's background, and I was beginning to look at different courses to make me feel equipped to do this job. And none of them were right, and yet they were fantastic courses, and it didn't make sense. And to cut a long story short, the result was that God was saying to me, there's something more. What if I fall? But oh my darling, what if you fly? It's ordination. My goodness, I've grown up in a vicarage. This is the last thing I wanted to do. And yet, I knew deep down that this was what God wanted me to do. So I did a part-time training course and carried on as a family and children's worker as I did it. So what St Mellitus now offers of context training was what I did by default because I was working for a church. But it was a great way to train for ordination. I was doing my curacy at St Saviour's, and again, my plan was to stay there. And I was going to be able to become an associate there. I was doing my IME, the curate's training, and I was in a parish one day. We went round each other's churches, and we went to a village 3 miles outside Guildford for one of our days, and it was a quiet day. And we had an opportunity to spend some time around the village. And after lunch, I wandered to outside the church and sat on a bench, and it was May time. It's a beautiful sunny day, and I was looking at the church. And this only happened twice in my life. I audibly heard God's voice. He said, you could be the vicar here. And it really threw me. I was not looking to be a vicar. I was going to stay where I was. I wasn't looking for incumbency. But the voice was so strong. And the sense of calling so deep that I knew I needed to do something about it. The church wasn't vacant, and I hadn't finished my curacy, but I just locked it. And a year later, the church came into vacancy. I still hadn't quite finished my curacy. So again, I had all my reasons why I couldn't apply for this job. And I got a letter from the Director of Ministry saying, we're assuming you're staying at St Saviour's, but if you were interested in any other posts, it would be good to have a conversation. I thought, well, there we go, I've got to do it, haven't I? So I emailed her and said, yes, I'd love a conversation. Met with her and said, actually, there is a post I think I might be interested in. And she said, well, we'll go for it. I said, well, I haven't finished my curacy. And I said, what about, the Archdeacon is really strict in saying that you've got to finish the curacy. She said, leave them to me, I'll sort it out. Still and I went for an interview for this job. I'll be really honest here, I turned up for interview, met the other candidates. It was not always the best when you arrive. 3 men and me. My first thought, what on earth am I doing? I don't even look like a vicar. Many women are thinking that. So just log that as well. That was my immediate feeling. I can't possibly do this job. And I was offered it, and I had a fantastic time, 9 years, in that parish. God showed me so much in that church. I'd been part of very large churches where most people arrived having come from my similar background, having grown up in faith and a strong faith and understanding. This was completely different. People were coming here with no background of faith. And my husband Paul and I led a home group, and we met them the first time, and we just said, tell us a bit about how you ended up at this church. I've never been so blown away in my life. These were people who cried out to God with no understanding of who he was. One woman who, at the end of an abusive marriage, lying on her bed saying, I don't know if you exist, God, but if you do, I need you, and finding herself at church. Someone who was cutting his grass one Sunday morning and suddenly had a deep desire to go to church and ended up in this parish church. Another person who'd been walking across the heathland and had a real encounter with God, knew it was something to do with that but couldn't articulate it, ended up in church. Well, it blew all my perceptions. I had given the mantra, you've got to belong before you can believe, and this was the reality of it, that these people were belonging and did believe and yet didn't have the language to articulate and needed to learn that journey. Talk about Missio Dei, God at work in the world, and I was seeing it in front of my eyes, that God was at work in people's lives before any Christian had actually gone and shared the gospel with them. And they were coming to this church. It was just the most exciting thing. And God showed me so much. It was uncomfortable because things were having to be done differently from how I'd done things before. And just challenging my own perceptions as to what it meant to be a disciple, and that question about what is daily discipleship. I was being challenged all the time, but he showed me so much. One Christmas, he gave me a very, very strong picture. The children's worker was setting up the traditional crib, which was a beautiful Victorian crib. Actually, it was the previous children's worker who was setting that up, because we had a new one by that point. And it was a beautiful thing, and it was set up behind the altar rail, because it was old and it was fragile, and they didn't want the children to touch it. And that's how it had always been. And they came and looked at it. And I'd never thought anything of this. But then this new children's worker put up in the porch a Playmobil crib, and everyone played with it. And I tended to stand in this porch before the service and after the service. And over the whole Christmas period, I watched children and adults playing with this. They'd look at me and say, are we allowed to play? I said, yes, of course you can. And they played with it, adults too, and all the characters ended up in the wrong places. The cow was on the roof, the angel was somewhere else, and the baby was under the table. And they were immersing themselves into the crib story. And I heard God say to me, do you want to be a Playmobil church or a Victorian crib church? And what he was saying to me, do you want to be the kind of church that says we have something very, very precious? Come to us and we will tell you what it is, and you take it on for yourself. Or do we want to be a church that says we have something very precious, and actually we can learn from you as well? And we want you to come in, and together we're going to explore this. And we're going to get it wrong a lot of the time, because actually we don't have all the answers. We're going to make a mess of it from time to time. But together we're going to find something really precious and we'll get new insights into what that is. So if you ever see, when you come to the palace at Christmas time, a flame of your crib up, that is why. Because my deep desire is that we create places where we encounter together, where we learn from one another and allow God to reveal himself in new and creative ways, because he is at work in our world, and we don't understand it. And until we actually share together and explore together and not always get the answers, he can't lead us on to those places where his kingdom is going to come in power. So that was my time in parish. Again, quite comfortable doing that, really enjoying that. Began to wonder whether I might take on another parish role when my bishop said, I think I can see some bishop potential in you. I had nightmares for a few weeks afterwards. The nightmares were about wearing mitres, seriously. And to cut a long story short, I had 3 years of exploring what that might mean. You don't apply to be a bishop. So if God was saying something to me, what did I need to do? And I explored different things. I did a particular training course. I applied for a couple of different jobs. None of it was right until I was interviewed for Bishop of Southampton. I had laid everything down saying, Lord, you're not showing me what to do. I'm not going to apply for anything else. 3 weeks later, I got an invitation to put in an application for Southampton. And so I did it, not thinking it would ever come to anything. Arrived in Winchester Diocese, and 7 months after I arrived, we went into COVID and lockdown, so again, that was very unusual. And then we had a little bit of a crisis, which you might have heard bits about, or a big crisis in Winchester, and I found myself as taking up the acting bishop's role in Winchester through a very challenging time. I know about complexity in life. I know about not having easy answers. I know about the need to rely on God. I know about the power of other people's prayers. During my time in Winchester Diocese, there were days where I found it really hard to pray because I didn't know what to pray for. But I felt so sustained supernaturally by the prayers of others that carried me through that difficult time. And again, God showed me things. Not everything works out immediately, but in everything that we do, if God is in it, we sense his presence with us. It doesn't take away the pain and the difficulty, but we sense him with us, and that is the most powerful thing. So I'm not entirely sure where I'm going with this, and I've got 3 minutes left. But a little bit of a pen story of where I am. But I arrive here feeling both excited and terrified. Terrified because I don't know you. Terrified because I don't even know the names of the villages when you talk to me. And that makes me feel really inadequate, and yet I know that that's okay. I come here incredibly excited because I know deep down that this is God's call upon my life, that he's whispered again in my ear, but what if you fly? And I've learned to trust him, and I've grown from that lacking in confidence, insecure little girl who knew Jesus loved me, but didn't dare speak in the world, to one who has let God mold me and shape me, and he's still doing a work. He's got a huge work still to do in me. But as I have let him do that, and as I've moved into places of discomfort, he showed me more about who he is. He showed me more about who I am. And I've seen him at work powerfully. And I'm excited to be here because I know he's already at work. And what I want to do with you is to explore the more of what he is doing and the ways in which we can join with him, because he longs for his people to know him. He longs for the brokenhearted to be healed. He longs for the love of Jesus to shine in every single community. And if I can do a little bit to help us find out what he's doing, it will be an immense and absolute privilege. So thank you.